We have already transformed the way the world operates. And now I believe we have a chance to do it all again. To be the great explorers of the next era.
The power to change the world.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this panel session focusing on embracing consumer-led sustainability, hosted by Kingfisher here today. I'm absolutely delighted to have this fantastic panel with me. First and foremost, Georgianne Regal from Kingfisher, the CEO, who's hosting all of us here today and co-founder of the business. We'll be talking to her momentarily about what the company's doing. Also have James Quito, who I'll refer to as JK, because that's the only way I know him. So if you wonder who I'm talking about, JK is here representing Samsung. We have Varun, who's here from Vodafone, and he's working in their connected devices tech space, so very, very relevant. And we have Danny Hernandez at the end representing Telefonica. Great pleasure. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you.
Sustainability and circularity is such a hot topic in our industry right now. If you've been walking around the show, or if you were here last year, you will have seen that it's a front and center topic. And actually, I'm quite excited this year to see it's gone from being the big headlines and buzzword to more being table stakes to be able to do business in this industry. But Georgianne, obviously, having founded this business, I know how passionate you are about it. Tell us a bit about Kingfisher and tell us about what you've been doing and what you're talking about here at the show.
Sure. Thank you. I'll start with the problem. The problem is that in 2023, according to the GSMA, 5.3 billion devices ended up in drawers or landfills. And that represents essentially a pretty one-way supply chain. Trade-in programs have been something that have been built up over the last 10 years across the globe, and they're making progress, but we can do more. And so Kingfisher brings programs that provide flexibility and convenience to consumers, and we roll those out through our carrier partners and our OEM partners around the world to give that flexibility to consumers, because when consumers have that flexibility, then we see an enhanced circularity of devices around the world. So that's what we've been doing, and I'll let some of the other folks talk a little bit about.
Well, I'm not going to let you off the hook yet. So for the benefit of the audience, can you talk a little bit? So conceptually, we get the business model. What does the customer journey look like if you're doing something like that? So for one of your partners, what are you enabling them to do in terms of, someone wants to get a phone back, or they want to have trade-in, or they want to do all sorts of things? How does that work?
So we give customers the opportunity to upgrade their device at any time, in any condition, for any reason. And usually, customers are buying their phones on financing through their carrier in most developed markets around the world. And so instead of having kind of a lock-in and a term and inflexibility during that period, they now have full and complete flexibility. So what does that mean? It means that, let's say I dropped my phone and I've cracked it. Instead of kind of figuring out repair, figuring out insurance claims, etc., what I do is I go into the channel, could be a retail store, could be online, and I say, gosh, I've just messed up my phone. The battery hasn't been working that well either. And they say, wonderful, what would you like as your new phone? Oh, but I still have X months financing left to pay. Don't worry about it. Just hand in your old phone. We'll wipe your old financing. What new device would you like to get into now? And then you take out a new device and go forward with that brand new device, at that stage. So that's how the consumer journey works. And the benefit of that is obviously that device has now been handed back in. So we're able to take that phone, get it back to a good condition through repair or refurbishment, and then get that back out to another customer and put it into a second life. And then we try to do the same thing at the end of that second life into a third life as well.
So it's really about taking users on a journey. The ones that can afford it can get the new devices, but second life, third life, and more. I'm going to jump right to the end. Danny, on the end, we're lucky to have two operators here. For you guys, I know both of your companies have got sustainability as a central pillar, but when it comes to devices, of course, we're aware of the problem. We've heard the numbers. What's happening at Telefonica with regards to the efforts you're making to try and overcome these challenges and improve the customer experience?
Thanks, Ben, and honored to be here. Thank you. Telefonica is building a 360 strategy that has 6 pillars. The first one is on building the product. So we're involved in eco-rating consortium, and we audit. We have trusted partners in terms of manufacturing, like Samsung. We then have a number of activities in buying and selling products, like the trading programs that Georgia mentioned. We also want to emphasize the use of the devices in a more responsible way, and we've launched very innovative solutions based on blockchain and Web3 and tokenomics in terms of how people can compensate their carbon footprint. And then there is the 3 Rs, the return, repurpose, and recycle, which is a core of us as well. So, and this is something, as Georgian said, that we've been working on for the last few years. There is still a journey for us to excel operationally at each one of those building blocks. And what we want to do is to give customers choice and give customers and serve the customer need that is booming in this category. So we are expanding the portfolio, including second-hand devices, refurbished devices. We are adapting our value proposition so that the trading and the carbon CO2 compensation is part of the message. We're also trying to obviously address the affordability. And this week in the show has been a bit of an eye-opener. We're witnessing a true revolution in devices with AI. AI is gonna introduce a never upgraded sort of user experience with new software updates over time. But then what we need to do is to make sure that the hardware is easier to repair, and the hardware is able to last longer as well, in the same way that the software is gonna be updated over time. So there's a lot of things that are happening right now, and in Telefonica we're just building a full ecosystem of initiatives.
So Varun, turning to you, we've had the Telefonica view. Vodafone have had sustainability as a big theme here for several years. I think last time your stand looked like a bit of a jungle with all the plants and everything. You've toned it down this year, but I'm sure it's equally as environmentally friendly. What's the story at Vodafone with regards to how you see this? Because you've got multiple markets, there's lots of ways you can be quite innovative.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of stuff that Danny talked about already. But I think for me, what's most interesting in the space we're in at the moment is, I mean, like you said, we've been on the sustainability journey for a while. It started with networks, it started with other parts of our value chain, but I think over the last 3 or 4 years, we've really started focusing in on devices and that customer value proposition. And I think the core hook for all of this, of course, comes from the planet and a sustainability agenda, but I think ultimately customers want value as well. And I think this ecosystem around trade-in, financing, extending device lifetimes actually gives a lot of value back to customers as well. And the proposition that we've built is, we call it Flex. It allows customers to finance their devices longer. So in the past, as telco operators, we've kind of been stuck on this 12-month, 24-month cycles for devices, even for new devices. So in many markets, we've now launched 36-month contracts, which already for your new device extends that device life cycle. And then once you layer that on with trade-in programs, refurb programs, you really start to see the value of bringing that device from 2 years to 3 years, 5 years, 6 years in many cases. So I think that proposition as a whole has landed really well, and we're quite scaled in terms of our financing prop. We're quite scaled in terms of trade-in, so we do several 100,000 transactions on trade-in annually across our wider footprint. And the big advantage for us as well is that because we are Europe and Africa, there are loads of potential opportunities of getting premium devices in Europe and making them affordable and driving that digital inclusion aspect in Africa as well.
So having had the operator view, JK, we'll come to you on the devices view. So Samsung's been stepping up its efforts on sustainability the last few years. I would urge anyone in the audience, if you've not been to the Samsung booth, it's their sustainability showcase is almost like a bit of kind of modern art. So they've got this kind of curve on their booth with the journey for the Galaxy S24, which has more recycled components in it than ever. So you can see the fishing nets and the cobalt and the aluminium and everything else. But of course, for you as a philosophy with the scale of Samsung, it's a tough journey. So can you talk a bit about how Samsung's doing that and how it's kind of working when you're going to your customers and talking about it?
Of course, and I think it has to be said, there is no secondary market without a really sustainable primary market. And so Samsung has some very bold global ambitions in regards to our sustainability agenda, a commitment to net zero from a carbon perspective by 2030. And so as you said, rightly on our stand, you can see what does that mean in terms of how we're developing products today. Significant inclusion of recycled materials, steel, aluminium, you mentioned cobalt. We're using 50% minimum recycled cobalt in our batteries. And so it's really important that our products are sustainable from the outset if we're then to talk about giving those products a second and a third life. So I think that's firstly a really important point. Secondly, we want to make those products last longer than ever before. So not only using durable materials, durable recycled materials, aluminium and of course titanium in the products, but we're committing to 7 years of OS and security updates. We announced that with S24. So I guess our role is to bring innovation to market, but it has to start its journey being sustainable, and then of course we can elongate that life cycle and have that product have a second and tertiary life. And of course from a Samsung point of view, we're about driving innovation. So we will bring innovations like AI to market and inspire customers to come back into the top of the funnel, and then of course use fantastic solutions like those that Kingfisher offer and executed through the networks to give people choice and flexibility when it comes to making that decision to come back into market and of course make sure their product is reused, recycled or repurposed in the right way.
So both you and Danny have talked about AI. By midday on Monday, I kind of had AI fatigue. Just like, oh my God, I was like, really, it was too much. And I think one of the challenges has been that, just this kind of AI rinsing of just sticking AI on the box isn't going to do it. But I'm interested to understand, you're talking about software. Do you think that AI will have a role to get consumers more engaged on kind of the lifetime of the phone? Because I'm almost envisioning this thing where you're going to be putting drops onto the devices that will almost make it feel like new because it seems to be progressing so fast.
We're going to make software updates exciting again. I think all too often we've asked customers to click here and update software version 6.8123, whatever. This time round, every time there's a new software update, it's an opportunity to enhance, to develop, to progress, to update the AI experience on device. And I think we have just entered a new era The smartphone was a very static era. You bought a piece of hardware, you used it for a couple of years, and then you chose another one. This time round from January, we're bringing obviously fantastic updated hardware, but with an AI layer on top. And as you rightly point out, Ben, that will just get richer over time. Look at the pace of acceleration of Gen AI models in the last 18 months, and imagine how we and our scale can bring that to mobile AI, and of course keep that fresh, relevant. And it's not just AI for AI's sake. I think it's really important, and what you've seen with Galaxy AI is very clear messaging around tangible, usable AI features that deliver a genuine benefit for our customers. And I think as long as the industry stays grounded on thinking about AI and the purpose of AI, not just badging it for badging's sake, then I think we've got a great future ahead of ourselves.
So going back to staying grounded, I'll come to you in a moment, Danny, but I want to go back to Georgianne just quickly. Going back to kind of the grounded, this is great. We're all here. We're all really close to the industry. We're hearing all these like cutting edge ideas of AI, renewing the life of phones. What are you doing to really get customers to engage in even understanding the concept of a more sustainable journey with their smartphone?
Yeah, it's a great question. And today, excuse me, around the world, most customers today don't really understand the carbon impact of a phone. It takes, it's about 80 kilos of carbon every time a new phone's manufactured. But most of that actually occurs in the manufacture itself. And so extending these lifetimes of the phones over 7-8 years is really how we'll reduce the total carbon impact. So we are trying to drive an education campaign globally with Kingfisher called World Phone Amnesty.
Right.
World Phone Amnesty is a global campaign to draw attention to the fact that, to the idea of a very simple concept. When you get a new phone, hand in your old phone. Today, I mentioned trade-in programs have been a huge investment across the globe in the last 10 years, but trade-in rates, or the circularity rate, so the percent of times that a new device sale is accompanied by a return device, is only between about 5 and 10% on a global scale today. There's places where that's higher, and we need to learn from those places that, the instances where we're driving that rate higher, but ultimately we need to drive to a 1-for-1 in order for the industry to be fully circular and sustainable. And we're a long ways from that right now.
So Danny, in that context, you're at the front line on Georgianne's mission insofar that if you're going to get true circularity, so it's all very well, putting them in a box and they get a little bit recycled, but the lifetime of a phone being enhanced would be really good. So how is trade-in affecting your business and maybe changing your relationship with customers?
Sure. We've been doing trading activities in some of the majority of our countries in our footprint, UK, Brazil, the whole of Latin America, but also in Germany. In Spain, though, we have decided to prioritize circular economy. And since last year, 2023, we launched a very ambitious program to boost to modify our value proposition to capture this opportunity. The research we've done internally shows that the second-hand market in Spain is a 500 million euro market with a KGR of the next 5 years of double digit, surpassing 750 million euros in 5 years' time. So we want to provide customers a plethora of options. So whether they want to bring their old tech as part of the value proposition, so they get a discount, of course, with a trading program, or the ability for us to re-inject those devices after they've been refurbished. We're, by the way, building refurbishment capabilities in Spain and so on. Then we are also building e-commerce sites as well to serve non-Telefonica customers as well with those products that we've obtained from our existing customers, but also from distributors and from other channels as well. So we have an ambition to grow by 5 this year compared to what we did last year. So there is a bold movement in terms of revenues.
Resold.
Exactly. So the circular economy part of our budget will be multiplied by 5 in this year.
JK.
I just wanted to raise a question on that for you, Danny. It's more of a question around how do you balance the contradiction between that really bold ambition in Spain, but that will probably elongate 3G and 4G device life cycles, yet you're trying to no doubt mitigate the length by which you have to maintain those networks and move on to 4 and then 5G. So how do you balance the economics of that between the consumer message and actually probably the business desire to streamline your OpEx and efficiency and move everything onto 5G?
Well, we are switching off copper in not only in Spain, but in the majority of our countries. We're looking into when we're switching off the 3G network and sticking to 4G or 5G. There is discussion as well in terms of switching off 4G if there is a business case as well. That requires affordable 5G devices, which we are going to start seeding the base with. So we are in a better shape to do that. Bringing repurposed products, at the moment those are high-end, mid-tier, high-end devices that have a second life. Therefore, they'll by default, most of them are already with the radio coverage of 4G or 5G. So I think that is going to contribute as well to our network objectives to switch off old technology.
So, go ahead, Julian.
I was just going to add that around the world, one of the things that you talk about in terms of distributing great second life devices, actually the supply is the challenge. The demand globally dramatically outstrips supply, and I think you guys see that, Varun, as well, especially for driving second life devices into your Africa businesses, right?
I think one of the biggest challenges is we really have to look at the end-to-end value chain, right? Because if you look at every 100 devices that are traded in, only 35 to 40% of them get recycled as second life devices. What happens to the rest of it, right? So which is why as operators by ourselves, we can never do that end-to-end value chain. So we rely a lot on our partners to actually get that done. Partners such as Samsung, potentially partners like Kingfisher, partners that we work with like Recommerce and so on. So I think having that end-to-end value chain view gives us confidence that every traded in device is either being recycled or being disposed of responsibly, because what you don't want is all of those devices end up in a landfill somewhere, right? So the trade-in program needs to perpetuate that end-to-end through the value chain, and I think that's key. The second part of which Georgianne mentioned as well is that there's such huge demand for second life refurbished devices. We're never going to be able to create that from a singular trade-in funnel. So it needs a broader pool of devices across markets, and we need access to global pool of devices to really sustainably drive that, at least in Europe.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So, JK, there's kind of a tension in some respects. I think you've talked, the question to Danny was really interesting insofar as the network operators will be wanting to push technology further. You obviously want anyone who's got a Samsung device to have a great experience, but obviously the business is predicated on selling devices as well. So you have to balance your sustainability goals. But what do you think the future for device makers will be? Because I'd imagine you're thinking about things like, how could we ensure that the experience on a second-hand device is as good as it can be to sustain your brand? Do you think you'll be moving in that direction to try and help that?
There's a lot of thinking going on in that space, and you're absolutely right. I think the second-hand market is fraught with questions and ultimately a mismatch of experiences for customers because they don't really know what quality they're getting. So we're looking globally as to how do we play a role in ensuring that, because I think it's a critical element of any secondary market has to be that it's clear what you're getting and what you're not getting, and there have to be some core principles around which a healthy secondary market is operated. Otherwise, it's the Wild West, right? So we're looking at that in detail, and we'll talk more about that in the future. I think I just wanted to also talk about, you said there about, yes, we want to make phones last longer, right? And that is a critical part of our mission. We will bring innovation that will hopefully spur people to want to get the latest innovation, but then ensure that the product that they swap in or trade in still has another 3, 4, 5 years of life to it, and it's going to continue to get those updates. So I've already mentioned the 7-year commitment, but also I think it's important to talk about the sustainability efforts on repairing devices. And so we've just made a big change, and we're the only global manufacturer now that does component level repair. And that sounds like a no-brainer, but actually for many mobile phones historically, when you want a new screen, you're basically replacing like 50% of the phone. So actually there's a lot of inefficiency in the repair process what we've just introduced in the last 6 months or so is component level repair. So if you need a new screen, you're only going to replace the OLED panel. You're not going to replace all the rest of it. That reduces the size of that component by about 60%. You scale that up in terms of the efficiency of shipping those products around the world. And importantly, for the consumer benefit, it's 30% cheaper to replace the screen, because that might be the only bit you've dropped or damaged or what have you. So I think it's really important. We're really focused on making it cheaper to repair products, whether that's whether you're brave enough to do a home repair or whether or not you want to go and take it into a store and get it done properly. You've got to make it cheaper, and we're working closely to do that.
So, Georgianne, from your perspective, that's an important element that people don't see, but you were talking about the fact that you want to see a second, a third, a fourth life. So is that a barrier you come up with some manufacturers where it's hard to repair the devices kind of affordably or economically?
Well, I think, I'll link it back to what Varun said about how, in trade-in programs, only 35% of those phones are often getting reused, right? And if the repair is easier, faster, cheaper, right, that's going to increase the percent of which can get back into another customer's hands. One of the things that we see is trade-in programs, you tend to get, NPI -3, NPI -4 devices back generally. A little bit more, take a bit more work to repair, not necessarily the best devices that people want as secondhand, because again, they might be on 3G.
So that's 3 and 4-year-old devices.
Exactly, right? Yeah. That's what a trade-in program typically is going to produce. Whereas the flexibility program, we've had a program in place in Australia for the last 3.5 years. Over 1.5 million customers have subscribed to that program over the last 3.5 years, and in that program we get NPI -1 and 2 devices back. Again, easier to lift up to a high standard of quality. When we get them back at that stage, they're going to be 4G and 5G devices. So they're high demand second life devices, and we're able to get those back into circulation and meet the demand that the market has.
And for you, JK, do you think there's value in even older devices being able to reach a new demographic where you can put a phone into a hand of someone who probably would only aspire to have a Samsung phone, get them on that journey, and then ultimately they kind of join your ecosystem, family, whatever you want to call it?
For sure, and actually it's not a new thing that we've been doing, which is to repurpose old devices completely and turn them into something different. So there's a program we've got where you can turn an old S8 phone into a baby monitor, for example, or turn it into using our IoT platform and smart things, just repurpose it and have it plugged in the corner of the kid's bedroom and use it as a kid's baby monitor or what have you. So I think there's ways by which you can ensure that products, when they've naturally come to the real end of their life, can still be utilized for something else. And what we want to ensure is that customers' phones last as long as possible, but also when they are coming to the end of their natural life, they have an even final life to be utilized, or then of course they're refurbished and replaced appropriately. But I think you're absolutely right. We see customers step through the journey. They all aspire to a top-end phone, but we're in the business of democratizing our technology as well and making sure that we can deliver that to as many people as possible, and that's what we're doing with AI right now.
Changing gear, Danny, at Telefonica, I think you've got something called a living app offset. And it's an interesting descriptor, but I'd really love to know more about what is this? Is this like helping users understand their footprint, or what's the...
So I mentioned it a little bit before, but just to explain, so, the way you incentivize people historically has always been either, the markets, the institutions, and so on, but tokenomics truly revolutionized how you can incentivize people, and definitely loyalty programs based on tokenomics is something that we've been investigating since 2020. In Movistar in Spain, we launched a Movistar token program, so we have more than 300,000 customers on that program, and basically they generate their own tokens based on the use of the network, on the products and services they have, how old they have a contract with us. So we reward them, and they can redeem those tokens in a number of programs, right? And one of them is this living app that you referred to. It's something I'm very proud of because it's an innovation project. We know that the production of a smartphone is approximately 50 to 80 kilos in carbon footprint, right? But when a customer uses their fiber network, when they watch a TV, when they use their mobile phone, they're also generating a footprint. So we have algorithms that measure that, your footprint, in terms of carbon, CO2. And we gave them the opportunity to redeem those tokens they generate to compensate that footprint monthly. So you go to the TV, switch on the TV, there is a row with a large number of apps. You select the sustainability app, and then the customers then, first of all, become aware of how much they've spent that month. And we give them the opportunity to redeem immediately there with your remote control those tokens that you've generated, and then you can select one sustainability project. We cooperate with a startup called Climate Trade, and we shortlist a number of exciting sustainability projects, whether it's a reforestation project in Peru, in Brazil, in Amazon, or whether it's a plastic collection project in the Mediterranean Sea. Customers then are choosing the one they are more proud of. Normally it tends to be a local one, close to where they live. And then they get a blockchain certificate back to them that they can publish into social network and the media, and they can show off with their friends.
I think
and so on.
We'll save the detail on the blockchain complexity for another panel. We've got 1.5 minutes left, Georgianne, so I'm going to give you the final word, which is, you're sitting here, you're starting a journey, you've already done a lot, but what would be your, if we're here in a year, what would be your view, or even if you want to make it longer, 5 years, whatever, how would you kind of measure success with your knowledge of what the whole industry is trying to do?
Yeah. Well, if we think about the goal to drive for that one-for-one replacement, how are we going to get there, right? And I've mentioned trade-in programs are difficult to grow up beyond that 10% range without subsidizing significantly. And so, but what we have seen, I mentioned that program in Australia over the last 3.5 years, we've had a 15x increase in the rate of return devices by having a flexible ownership program in the market. And that's that upgrade anytime you want, et cetera. Just hand in your old phone, get the new one, keep going. And so if we are able, we've seen the success of that program without even telling people that, hey, this is green, this is sustainable. We didn't even communicate that to customers, but they just were 15 times more likely to bring in that phone. So if we can take that learning and start to scale that around the world through our carrier partners with programs that provide flexibility and value and convenience for customers. And this is obviously things that we're talking about with all of our carrier partners here this week at Mobile World Congress. Then we're going to be able to start to achieve that scale all around the world.
Perfect timing. We're out of time. We could have talked for a lot longer. Thank you all so much for sharing your insights on the market. If everyone wants to join me and thank the panel for their insights. Thank you very much for coming.